Welcome to the Susan Brender Show. It's all about you. Featuring shows on health and wellness, the performing arts, politics, and people who inspire you to be your very best. And now, here's Susan Brender.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. You know, very often I have guests that are exceptionally special. Today is no exception. My guest is Neville Johnson. I cannot do justice to who he is. Therefore, I'm going to ask him to introduce himself. And I want to say to him, you know, Neville, you must have so much to talk about. And we are going to spend 30 minutes with you today really discussing your book and various other things you're doing. So tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been an entertainment and media lawyer for many years, and I represent a lot of celebrities and estates of celebrities, etc. But I also am an author, and I wrote a couple of books about the greatest coach in the history of athletics in America named John Wooden, who was also a philosopher. And then beyond that, I lead a band, and I write songs as the artist Trevor McShane, and you can see videos of me up on YouTube. And I'm in Beverly Hills, California.
Yeah, that's really interesting because you've now mixed a lot of the different skills that you have, and I'm sure that's quite an endeavor. But before we really begin to talk about John Wooden, Pyramid of Success and Woodisms, I want to talk to you about your writing. When did you actually start, and how long have you been writing?
Well, I went to UC Berkeley. I wrote for the school newspaper there, and I was the music critic. I seriously started writing the book around 1981, and it took me a long time to finally get it completed, but I did. This is the first book on Coach Wooden called The John Wooden Pyramid of Success. Since then, you know, I write stuff for the legal community, and I've probably written about 3,000 to 4,000 poems since 1993. That's what I do in my spare time.
In your spare time? It sounds
well,
like
you know, you'd be amazed at how much downtime there is in life, and if you're standing waiting for a bus, or let's say I've completed my work for the day and I'm just waiting for somebody to pick me up, and I've got 15 or 20 minutes, or the meeting hasn't started yet, well, you can look at your Facebook page, or you can do something creative.
Yeah, well, you know, it's a very interesting thing that you're saying, because very often I get very annoyed, I have to admit it, and the reason that happens is because, you know, you see people sort of running around like crazy, and they're always saying, I'm so busy. You know, we live in this society where everybody just keeps on, you know, rushing through everything and being so involved in little things that don't really even matter to their lives. What would you say to that?
I would say that we are, because of technology, our senses are assaulted increasingly, and so we need to pick and choose and filter, just as we do everything else in our life, about how we're going to spend our time and what we're going to concentrate on. But, you know, in the old days it was 3 channels on TV or 3 networks. Now it's 300, et cetera. So it's overwhelming. It's also great at the same time, but you got to have balance.
That's right. Well, now let's get into your book, because, of course, this has been a long endeavor. You mentioned that you started writing it in 1981. I mean, we're talking many, many years ago. So tell me a little bit about John Wooden, this amazing UCLA basketball coach.
Well, what I say about Coach Wooden is that he is, I think, inarguably the greatest coach of all time. From 1963 to 1975, his team, the UCLA Bruins, the basketball team, won the national championship every single year, except for 2 years. And that's a record that's not just unequaled, it's unapproachable. He won the national championship 7 years in a row. He had like 3 undefeated seasons. These are all just staggering. And he's responsible. We all know in our society the word the full court press. Well, he's the one who really popularized it, and with a small team was able to win the first year with this amazing hand flying in your face form of basketball, which just scared the bloody heck out of the other teams and whopped them. But okay, so that's the one thing is that, yes, incredible coach, over his whole career, and I went back to his high school, etc. But beyond that, incredible human being, a philosopher, a saint, I would say.
Wow.
Just an extraordinary person who was so down to earth and loved and loving, and not what you usually see from or think about from athletic coaches.
Well, what made him that way? There must be something in his background. Was he a basketball player himself?
He was the player of the year in 1930, I believe, at Purdue. And he played basketball in high school. His team won the state championship one year. And then he went to Purdue, where he was a star. And then after that, he was in we coached somewhat high school, and then he went into the service. And when he came out, he started doing college ball. But yeah, why was he so? He came from a very decent family in a small town called Martinsville, outside of Indianapolis, and just really good values. His father, they had a farm that failed, and the father became a masseuse at the local spa, etc.
Well, that's interesting. I wish I knew him then. I think that's really wonderful. Let me interrupt you, John, because we're talking about a coach, and we're talking about sports. Now, one of the things, and I mean, this is all around the world. This is not unique to America, but the point is that people, they pay a great deal of attention to sports, and when kids get involved, their parents are right there on the field very often, and they're, inspiring them and pushing them and trying to get them to do the best they can. But sports, when it comes to high school and when it comes to school in general, don't you think too much attention is given attention rather to sports rather than to academics?
Absolutely, but welcome to America, and welcome to most societies of the world. And sports is the great metaphor for sort of competition and loyalty and spirit and all the rest of that stuff. And that's why teams are so successful, from Pee Wee leagues to the pro football, etc. We all want to go to the stadium and see our respective team win overall. But of course, it should not overshadow academics, and but it does, and we all know from in high school it was the jocks that seemed to get all the attention, and then 20 years later at the reunion, it's like, what are you doing? Right? That's right, and very often we note that when a athlete leaves his position, if he was not really a major athlete and he hasn't prepared himself for any particular type of job, he winds up somewhere down at the bottom of the pit, if you will. And there's story after story of ball players who made a lot of money and then just blew it all. Wooden referred to all of his players as student athletes, and he told them, "You're here first for an education. Basketball comes second."
Oh, that's interesting.
And he was very proud that nearly 100% of his players graduated, which today is unheard of, because all the players who were any good the first or second year go pro.
So what do you attribute that to?
Well, one of the deals was back in those days, the NCAA didn't allow players to go pro. So that's one of the things that happened. But the second thing is the lure of the money. I mean, if you get picked up, it's millions and millions. Yeah,
that's true. And the fact that some of these athletes are making the millions, and then there are others who are in the background who are maybe in a sense just as good, make very little. And there's sort of an injustice, don't you think?
Yeah. And then the problem is that you have your halcyon days as an athlete, and then you drop off a cliff, and you see all the problems that occur with these people, where they have broken homes or drugs or injuries that affect them the rest of their life.
Mm-hmm. So let's get back a little bit to Wooden and yourself. So how did John Wooden actually influence you?
Well, what had happened was in 1981, I had achieved what I sort of set out to do as a lawyer, which was to represent the biggest act in rock and roll, and I was the lawyer for Yoko Ono and the estate of John Lennon. And I was thinking to myself, well, okay, but that's good, but it's not the be-all, end-all. And I saw this thing called the Pyramid of Success on somebody's wall, and I said, who did that? And my friend said, that's John Wooden. I said, the basketball coach? Because I'd not been familiar with it. And it was a philosophy that says success is peace of mind, which is a direct result of self-satisfaction, knowing you made the effort to become your best. And the key ingredients are enthusiasm and hard work as at the foundations and going after a great and difficult challenge. And he has many other aspects to it: poise, confidence, ability, skill, being focused, teamwork, faith, etc. And I just said, this is interesting. I want to learn more about this. So I called him up and said, can I come over and talk to you? And he said, yeah.
Sure.
So I went over, and then I called him up and said, I want to interview you. And he said, okay. So I went over and I interviewed him. Then I called him up and said, I want to write a book about this. And he said, no, my wife is ill. I can't do it. So I started writing it, and I sent over the first few chapters to him, and 2 months later it came back redlined.
That is so neat. Very often there are athletes and trainers and various other people who are involved in sports who have a really big head. And now you're telling me that Wooden really influenced you because he was sincere, and he was the type of person who would help anybody, it sounds like. So with that said, what's his winning formula?
He was so organized. So when he did his practices, no drill lasted longer than 4 or 5 minutes. He kept the students or the athletes interested and motivated, so they didn't get bored. He said to me, I could have probably had a degree in psychology. I went to so many classes on it. And he said the best teams are not those with the best athletes. It's those who work best with each other. He consistently improved and was trying to improve himself as a coach. And so that, for example, after he did the original full court press, he got Lou Alcindor, now known as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, to come in. And so Coach, in the off season, learned everything he could learn about so-called big men and how to play them in a game, etc.
Right.
He didn't drink, he didn't smoke. He was a homebody kind of a guy, and he was just very well grounded, I would say.
How I look at books, and I look at different kinds of material that's been written about different athletes and different coaches and people of that nature. And one of the things that really interests me is how how you choose your subject and how you develop your subject. So tell our audience a little bit about, again, the word Woodisms. Am I saying it correct? It's Woodenisms. And,
right.
Why that word? I mean, because it sounds like you've made up that term.
Well, that was given to me by his son-in-law, who is a basketball coach and who's had put together a number of these and handed them to me, and he called them Woodenisms, and I thought that worked. And let me just make it clear. So I wrote the John Wooden Pyramid of Success. That's available in paperback, and then more recently, just in the last few months, we put out Woodenisms, which is just the wisdom and sayings of Coach John Wooden. And he coined these. He put these together over time and passed them out, and they've been in newspapers and in speeches he's given, all the rest of that stuff. But I compiled them all, and so there they are.
So you were a lawyer, and you still, I assume, continue to be a lawyer, and you're a writer. You're a person who does poems. You're a person who also is a musician, and all of all the things that you're doing. And I don't expect that you have any particular one that is the best, but you could give us a sense of what really gives you the most, wonderful feeling.
Well, I would have to say that, becoming a lawyer put my life into focus, and that's been tremendously satisfying. But I've also said throughout my life, to the people who say, I should have written a book. Well, why didn't you? In other words, why do you just have to do one thing in life? You can do a number of things well. I love Steve Martin. The dude is an incredible actor, incredible comic, incredible banjo player.
Yes.
And there you go. I'm not saying I'm not.
And John also a collector of art, and I think he's an artist himself as well, and sells his art for quite a bit of money, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so I love all of my children. I'm not going to say, I guess I love them all equally. Music is a great I'm in a practice where basically what I do is, I say this, I meet all these people I'm very interested in meeting who have no interest in meeting me, and that's because I'm either suing them or taking their deposition, okay? But what I'm doing is I'm theoretically representing or defending the righteous and making the world a better place. And but that's conflict all day, or quite a bit of it. And so when you can go into the other zone of art and creativity and I love you, then that's a nice place to be as well.
So I always use a statement which I say art transforms people in ways they can't even describe. It's that sort of, has that kind of influence on people. Am I right?
Yeah, and I think what's great about creating, whether it's prose or poetry or music, is that you never know what the heck's going to come out. You sit down with a blank page and maybe you come up with a line, and one thing follows another, and it's, oh my gosh, this is fun. This is good.
Is there any one poem that you remember, if you don't have your book in front of you, would give a sense of who John, not John, but rather who you are? Is there any? Yeah,
this is on my new album. The Best Man Is Me. Today's the wedding day. My best friend is her man. Her wedding ring is in my hand. Someone is full of envy. Someone she used to date. Someone who cannot believe this is his fate. For yes, I still love her. The best man for her is me, but I'm only the best man. The wedding ain't for me. I really tried to win her. I did the best I could. I even prayed about it. She never understood. My love is genuine, true as true can be. Now standing at the altar, all alone, that would be me. The best man is me, but she'll never know. My best friend will have her on with the show. Down the aisle she comes. Everyone smiles but me, because I'm the best man for her. The best man is me.
I could almost see that. I closed my eyes for a moment and I listened to you, and I almost see it in a song. It would be a wonderful lyric for a wonderful song, and people need to.
It is a song.
It is a song.
It is a song. I haven't released it yet, but it's coming out in the next few months.
Great! And who are you going to have singing it though?
I'm singing it. It's Trevor McShane. Yeah, I recorded it in North Carolina with world-class musicians who produced REM, and one of the guys used to be in a band with Rod Stewart, and it's good. It sounds more than good. It sounds fantastic. So let's talk about a little bit about inspiration, because you inspire me, because when I listen to you, and I think you're going to do, our audience is going to feel the same thing, because look at, you're a man who has such a lot of wonderful and terrific hobbies and career. What an amazing career! But there must be some specific person who set you on the right track and really inspired you to do all the things that you're doing. Well, I'd say, my parents, of course, but after that, I had a terrific professor who taught me criticism at Berkeley named David Littlejohn, and then Wooden. Wooden is the man. Wooden is the most important person in my life after, for inspiration after my parents. This is one other thing I want to say about Wooden, which is so beautiful, and that is that he retired in 1975. And most of the time you think, well, people, when they retire, fade into the sunset. Mm-hmm. His wife died. It was very sad. He was very heartbroken. But he continued on and lived till he was 96, I believe, and had a marvelous life, giving speeches and meeting people. And this is what's so incredible is that he was the greatest teacher and coach for these students, going back to when he was coaching high school. And he stayed in touch with them all the years afterwards, so he knew where almost everybody was in his whole life, and he went from teacher and mentor to friend. And that was so beautiful to see that happen. And how often does it happen in our culture, whether it's sports or business or education?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that made him even extra special, and that's, I assume, he influenced you to the point where now, do you feel like you can be the inspiration to others? And I'm talking. Tell me about. I mean, I know it's a little embarrassing for us to always, say something wonderful about ourselves, but I do want you to say that. I want you to have our audience recognize what is it about you that makes you the man that you are.
Well, it's a little presumptuous of me, but since you ask.
Go for it.
Look, I got out of law school. I always wanted to be an entertainment lawyer. I didn't have a leg up in the community at all. And I just put my head down and worked really hard for all of these years, and now I have a 9-person law firm, and we're very well established, and we have terrific clients, and we make a very good living. And as a result, of course, I'm known by all the law students who would like to get a job here or want to learn about entertainment law, or it's like, oh my gosh, you're so-and-so, et cetera. And so that's nice, but it just came from doing a good job, I would say, over all of these years, and loving what you do. I mean, that's the key to what Wooden was saying in his pyramid. He says it's enthusiasm and hard work, and with respect to enthusiasm, he says, you got to love what you're doing. And I said, well, what should a person do who is in a job that he doesn't or she doesn't like? And he says, as quickly as possible, try and get another job in something you're doing. And I'm saying you only go around the bloody planet once.
Sure.
So let's, make the best of it and most of it. I mean, here I am all these years later out of high school, and it's like, what, another reunion? Oh, no.
Well, we all are concerned about all of a sudden one day we wake up and we look in the mirror and we say, who the heck is that? And, time passes so quickly for so many of us. But again, I would like you to tell our audience where if they want to get some inspiration, where do they contact you? How do they get to know you a little bit better and you to know them, and to also promote your book? I mean, I'd like you to do that as well and tell us where we find the books, and just, again, one little excerpt, if you can. Do you have the book in front of you?
Yeah.
Would you just open up to the prologue and let's see what you have to say about the book, and so that our audience understands how profound it is.
All right. Well, this is from the Woodenism book, and I just say, I'll just give you a little bit of it. John Wooden matters because of his values, experience, insights, and example. This is a book of his sayings coined by his grandson-in-law, who compiled some of them. And then I go on to say that I wrote a book called The John Wooden Pyramid of Success. And I said, of all I have ever done, I am most proud of writing that book, in part because it was the hardest endeavor I've ever taken on. And there's so much to learn about and say about this legendary sports figure. And he changed my life for the better in all respects. And he led a balanced life. And so I'll just give you a few of the phrases, some of the things that are from the book. He said this. I was talking to an athlete who said, I brought a bunch of Cub Scouts to see him before a game, and he said, kids, love is the most important word in the English language, followed by balance. That's amazing from a basketball coach. He says things like, there is no pillow as soft as a clear conscience. The true athlete should have character, not be a character.
That's even funny. That's humorous, actually.
It is amazing how much can be accomplished if no one cares who gets the credit. The athlete who says something cannot be done should never interrupt the athlete, the one who is doing it.
Right.
And I'll give you a couple more.
Okay.
He says the two most important elements in coaching are the knowledge that's necessary and the rapport, the company you have with those you're trying to teach. And he says, the ideal level of motivation is nothing other than consistent preparation and execution that starts the first day of practice and is maintained at a constant level throughout the season. I'll tell you one other thing I learned from him that I've followed or tried to in my life, which his daughter said, unless you had been at the game that day, you would have no idea who won. And Wooden said, never get high after a victory and never get low after a defeat. Just maintain your calm at all times. And I thought, that's the way to go, you know. When I'm in court, you know, the judges hate it if the lawyers are bickering with each other. Sure, we're advocates and we want to fight, but it's, you know, maintain your cool when you're talking like this way as opposed to in a more histrionic fashion. You get more bite.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because TV and the news and various other stations all around the world, actually, you know, sensational is the name of the game for them. So when there is an athlete, for example, who's caught cheating on his wife, and we probably all can figure out one of the main people who did that, that's what they stick to. They don't stick to the fact that this person spent a lot of time practicing, a lot of time putting all his efforts into learning, because it's kind of a math skill and a science skill, isn't it, to really learn a sport?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's something called talent, which people have, but then you need to have to hone that talent and to work it correctly. You know, you bring up another point, which is that athletes who become successful then become, you know, the focus of adulation. They become heroes of a sort, and so many of them, as we know, disappoint us.
Yes.
And Wooden is one of those few. Well, I'm sure there's many others, but Wooden is one who never disappointed us on every level. Same thing with politicians, rock stars, actors, people in the public eye. I mean, we're all flawed individuals, but I did my best. As a lawyer, I'm trained. I'm a litigator. I'm trained to go out and look for the bad in people and find inconsistencies and all the rest of that stuff. And I got to tell you, Wooden is about as clean as they come. Wow. He's just a great, great, great person all around.
Yeah. Well, I have to say that this has been a very fast and wonderful interview, and I'm very appreciative, Neville, that you have been on my show. I want to tell the audience one more time. We had today, Neville Johnson, who we're interviewing, is an inspiration and should be an inspiration to everyone. And Neville, one more time with regard to your books, give us the name. And
the new book is called Woodenisms. It's a slight book, but it's got all of his sayings. And the other book is called The John Wooden Pyramid of Success. Neville Johnson you can find at Johnson & Johnson LLP in Beverly Hills. I also am on Facebook as Neville Johnson. I also have a website for Trevor McShane, my music, and my book company is called Cool Titles, and you can find info there too.
I've been honored having you on the show. You're truly, I mean, when I use the word inspiration, I don't use it lightly, and you are an inspiration to people, and I thank you so very much for being on my show.
Great, I enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to The Susan Brender Show. To be a guest, email sebrender@yahoo.com.